Hello, everyone. This is Sinema77, horror and cult film lover. I'm back with another movie review, and going along with a lot of the true crime, movies that I've been reviewing. Now it's time to tackle Ed Gein. This is a 2000 film, directed by Chuck Parello and starring Steve Railsback and Carrie Snodgress. The movie tells the story of Ed Gein, who's known as the Butcher of Plainsfield. And in 1957, what ended up happening was um, a hardware store owner by the name of Bernice Warden. She had gone missing, and her son Frank, he had gone out on a hunting trip that day, and she was manning their hardware store in Plainfield, and all of a sudden she was found missing. And he came back that evening and he noticed that there was a trail of blood leading out the back door. And he called the cops, and a detective named Schley, I think his name was. He had come to the store and he asked him, "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" And he said, "Yeah, I believe Ed Gein had done this." And so they went out to Ed Gein's old farmhouse where it turns out Ed Gein was not home at the time, but they ended up going into the they ended up going into the house, and they found something that really shocked them. See, the thing about Ed Gein was that a lot of people had never been out to his house. They knew him around town, and they knew him as this kind of weird, oddball kind of a guy, and he had this very not funny sense of humor. And at one point, there was the owner of a bar, a tavern named Mary Hogan, and she went missing. And for almost, I believe it was about 2 years that people talked about. They wondered what had happened to her. There were some rumors going around that maybe she had something to do, with like gangsters or something like that. But the thing was that Gein was always saying that she was down there at his house and he had her there. And the thing was, a lot of people didn't take him seriously because he always just seemed weird and odd, and he had this not very funny sense of humor. So they just figured, it was just him goofing around. But see, that day when they broke into well, they didn't break in, but they went into his house, and this is what they found: that his house was completely messed up and just completely in disarray, and just trash everywhere. And it's like he never threw any garbage out. I mean, this, I think at first, they pretty much figured that this guy would definitely have, if they had the show Hoarders on TV back then, he would have been the biggest star on that show more than anybody else. And it turned out that he had just had like a room that he slept in, and just basically he had the room in the he kind of a bedroom in the kitchen, and that was it. And then they looked around the house, and they just kind of found all kinds of weird stuff and magazines and books, and they found out he had like all these books about um like stuff about Nazis, and he had stories about people, grave robbers, and African headhunters and things like that. And he just kind of had this really weird library of books and things like that. Then they went upstairs. It was upstairs that they realized that there were some rooms that he had boarded up and had blocked off, and one of the rooms that this picture here shows is the room of his mother. And you can see it's completely different from the rest of the house, because the room, while it's dusty, it's in pristine condition, it's clean, and it's like nothing's been touched. And what ended up happening was that after Gein, his mother had died, he had pretty much boarded off the room, and pretty much just never went in there. So then the officers, they continued to look, and out in his shed they ended up finding a really gruesome discovery. They had found her body. She had been hung upside down. Her head is missing. She had been basically gutted and flayed. open like a deer, which was really disturbing. And that was the thing. That was it. Pretty much everybody knew that Gein was the one who was behind all of this. And then they ended up finding so many other horrible things, that he had done, and that he had made a skin suit out of women, that he had done so many things. He had done like he had like a belt made out of female nipples. He had what else was there? He had taken skulls and used them as bowls and drinking cups, things like that. He had you know peeled off the faces of women, and he had a box of vaginas, vulvas, that he had decorated. One of them was painted silver and decorated with a bow and things like that. And it wasn't long before they got him. They knew that he had murdered um, Bernice Warden, so they knew that. But on further investigation, they found out that Mary Hogan, they had found her severed head among the remains of everything else that was in there, and they realized that he was not kidding. The entire time, all this time, he had been saying that he had, um, that he had Mary Hogan at his house. It turned out it was true. That one night he had gone into her bar pretty much after she closed up. Nobody was around, and he took a gun and pretty much he shot her, drug her out to his truck, and took her back to his house where she pretty much died a slow death, where she pretty much bled to death, pretty much. And then he used her body parts to help decorate his house. Now, see, that's kind of the thing that's interesting about Ed Gein, and this here, like when they started looking, like they found also too evidence like this, you know, heads in boxes and things like that. They found like a um, what was it? They found like a suit that had like internal organs in it and stuff like that. I think there was like a what was it like a heart in a frying pan on the stove. They didn't, so definitely cannibalism was definitely something that they were looking into him for, and um, so then they took, they went and they found Ed Gein. He had been at a, basically a friend of theirs house, and they took him in. They arrested him and stuff, and then they realized that what ended up happening was the man was pretty much, he was definitely very insane. That he had, for years while he was growing up, he was being dominated and being um, basically abused by his mother and father. His father was a drunk, and they trying to make their farm work. And his mother was, she was very domineering. She was very like over religious, and she was, always like, and he had a brother named Henry. And that's the thing though too. To this day, a lot of people wonder, did Ed Gein have something to do with his brother? Because his brother died in a fire. That it was kind of mysterious, and when they found him, they believed he had head wounds. So at some point, they figured that Ed Gein had something to do with that. That he might have murdered his own brother. They couldn't really prove it, but there was speculation. To this day, a lot of people are convinced pretty much that he did murder his own brother, and that his mother for years, she pretty much beat them and made them read the Bible all the time, and she was always quoting scripture. She was always forcing them not to, have anything to do with the outside world, not to have anything to do with women. Women were all sinners and things like that, and so, and at one point the um, his brother Henry was going to break away from this. Their father had passed away, and he wanted to break away from this. He was going to marry a woman and live his life and everything else, and he just didn't want to be a part of this anymore. And they think that there was an argument between him and Ed. That's what led to his death. And so and then it was over a little bit of period of time after that. His mother, she got ill and she died. And see, there's one thing though too. It's like Ed Gein's story is the basis for Norman Bates in Psycho, and in the movie Psycho, that Norman Bates dug up the body of his mother, and he had kept her around the house and spoken her voice and had conversations with her, things like that. Well, people took that literally, that Ed Gein had done the same thing. Well, apparently Ed Gein did try to get to his mother's body, but he could not do it because she had, I guess apparently like the ground was too hard. He couldn't get at it or something like that. But when she died, he pretty much, the man was nearly 40 years old by then. And he pretty much, he snapped and, just, he was schizophrenic. He was seeing things, he was hearing things. So they ended up, he would start going out robbing graves at night. And at one point, he had somebody who was helping him. And, yeah, and then he would take the bodies home. One thing, a lot of people felt that he was into was necrophilia, which apparently he always said he was never into that, that he was not sexually attracted to the bodies because of the smell and things like that. But cannibalism, that was still kind of, iffy. Some people feel he did, some people feel he didn't, so that's always, all these years, that's kind of always been up for debate whether or not he actually ate any of the bodies of his victims and stuff like that, or body parts or whatever. But it is definitely, considered like, yeah, he might have done that. But also too, but really what he was mostly known for was he would dig up the bodies of these women. He would read the obituaries. He would go out, he would dig up their bodies and bring the bodies home. And then he would just start cutting them up, and he would use their body parts and skin and things like that to decorate his house. And, he upholstered a chair with human skin, things like that. Um, what was it? There was like a drum. He made like a drum with skin on it and stuff. He used bones, for like table legs, things like that, and just did all these kind of little, bizarre arts and crafts things, around his home and everything else. And um, but then it just got to a point that wasn't enough for him. Then finally, that's what set him off to go and first off, he killed Mary Hogan and took her back to his house. And when she died, he started using her body parts and stuff too. And in his belief, he ate parts of her as well. And then Bernice Warden, sometime later, there is. I do remember hearing though that there is ideas that there were like girls that went missing, like girls that were nearby the Gein farmhouse, or that girls that just all of a sudden up and gone and stuff. And they think, over time it was never actually proven, but Ed Gein was considered like maybe he had something to do with it. But anyway, when they took him in, they of course they did all these psychological tests on him, because I mean obviously they figure obviously somebody who does this has to be out of his mind. He's got to be insane. So they did that, and so he was put in a mental institution for many years. And because he was just considered, too insane to stand trial. Finally, he did go to trial, and he was pretty much hospitalized for the rest of his life because, he was ruled, guilty by reason of insanity. And so they pretty much they put him into, the mental institution. He stayed there until he died, um, you know, from respiratory failure in 1986, I believe. It was either 84 or 86. I'm sorry, I forget the exact year. But so anyway, so in 2000, they made a movie about him, Ed Gein. Now the thing is, though, is like over the decades, so many movies have been made about him. Psycho was clearly an inspiration for, as a matter of fact, Robert Bloch, who he lived in Wisconsin at the time of the Gein murder, so he knew a lot about it. He had like access to a lot of information, newspapers, things like that, so he could get information about it, which he used to help create the character of Norman Bates. Um, Other films, I mean, obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leatherface is inspired by Ed Gein. What else? Silence of the Lambs. Those three are the most well known, but there are other movies based on Ed Gein. Movies like Deranged, which I think Bob Clark was a producer on it. He didn't direct the movie. The movie was directed by Jeff Gillen and Alan Ormsby, and Ormsby wrote the script, and he and Tom Savini did the special effects for it and stuff like that. But and there were other movies. There are plenty of movies made about Ed Gein. There was it Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield or whatever, with Kane Hodder. That movie's, I love Kane Hodder, but that movie's absolutely atrocious. But this one here is it's really actually a really good movie, and we'll go ahead and I'm sorry, I went all this time talking about the history of Ed Gein, but now we'll get ready to start talking about the movie itself. So anyway, so like I said, yeah, the movie came out in 2000, and they ended up getting Steve Railsback to play Ed Gein in the movie. And of course, the reason being because he did such a great job playing Charles Manson in the 1976 TV movie Helter Skelter. And the only downside though is like to my knowledge, there's never really been any kind of like footage of Ed Gein where you can like I mean there's footage of him, but you never see him, you never hear him talk, you never really get a real sense of his personality or anything like that. So it's not really 100% sure if Railsback does a super close performance to him, but nevertheless though his performance is really captivating, and it's definitely a reason to watch this movie. And one of the more gruesome images from the movie is here, where he's wearing the skin suit that he made so that he could dress up and run around his property, dress up like a woman and things like that. But I mean, they do their best. They, I mean, here he is, like dressed to look like Ed Gein, and he does bear resemblance to him. There are shots, where you could see, like, yeah, you could see him very much being like Ed Gein and stuff like that. So, but anyway, so if you're a fan of Steve Railsback when he played Charles Manson, though, and Helter Skelter, then yeah, you're going to love him in this movie too. He does a great job. Like I said, I can't 100% say if it's really authentic, if it's very truthful to the way Ed Gein was, but Railsback does an amazing job, and the movie is. It's really a good movie, and this started off in the early 2000s. This started off a series of direct-to-video movies, um, based on serial killers, because this ended up becoming quite popular. And then this one inspired. This one brought Ted Bundy. That I had done a review on that one earlier. I think it's still up. It's called Ted Bundy versus Tom Savini, something like that. But anyway, so they did that one. They did the movie Dahmer that had Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye from Avengers. So that's got him in it. They did Gacy with what was his name? Mark Pat? No, not Mark Patton. Oh man, I forgot the actor's name, but he plays Francis in Pee Wee's Big Adventure. Yeah. Anyway, but they did all those. They did movies on Starkweather, things like that. But yeah, this movie is really well done. Chuck Parello does a good job directing. The cast does a pretty good job. Carrie Snodgress, she does a great job playing Augusta Gein, the mother. I would say if there's anything that really kind of hurts this movie, though, is like it's definitely clear that this is a very low budget movie, and you can see like the hardware store is very, it almost feels like it was just something that they just built, because I mean the floors are like you see it, there's the floors just look like plywood and stuff like that. It feels, you could tell it looks very much like a set. um Another thing though too is there's a couple of images of some really poor CGI in it. Like they do the scene where Henry is confronting Ed about his relationship with their mom, and he doesn't want to, he wants to go marry this woman and be with her. So he hits him in the face with a gun, and he falls down. And then they talk about how he died in the fire, and then you see this kind of bad, you see him laying there, and then you see this kind of bad CGI circle of fire around him, things like that. And there's definitely, if you're one of those kind of people who, I know cinema snob is, but if you're one of those kind of people, like it drives you up the wall to see somebody, to see Day for Night in a movie, then yeah, this is going to drive you nuts, because you can clearly see that, some of the scenes where, like where he's at night, he's in the cemetery, he's digging up bodies and things like that. And you could tell that it's clearly, it's filmed in daytime. They just put a blue filter on the camera and things like that. So yeah, this movie could have really benefited from having a little bit more of a budget, have a little more money put into it so it can be put onto the screen. But that being said, though, it doesn't take away from the story or how powerful the subject matter is. Railsback's performance is definitely enough to keep you interested. It's definitely enough to keep you into the movie. like I said, I just can't promise you that it is the most um, authentic, definitive, representation of Ed Gein. I can't promise that, but Railsback being the great actor that he is, he's very charismatic. He keeps you interested. He keeps you wanting to watch it, and I mean, he is playing the elements. You hear all the elements about Ed Gein was kind of slow witted and just kind of odd and kind of weird and stuff like that. So Railsback, he plays it. He plays it to the hilt, plays it really well. Carrie Snodgress, like I said, she does a great job playing the kind of over religious, domineering, overbearing mother and things like that. She did a great job. The acting in the movie is definitely not a sore point. There's no weak links in the acting. I got to admit that. Maybe one or two, actors don't really play the best part, but overall the acting is fairly solid. There's like the woman who basically plays kind of Mary Hogan's character. She's they're kind of like she's trying to play the character as she was described in real life. She was foul mouthed. She was kind of like take no shit and all this other kind of stuff, and she kept the guys entertained at her bar and things like that. And but I mean, she got along with everybody and stuff. So, and the actress did a great job. I think she did fine. And the actress who plays, they changed the names though too in the movie, so they're not really called Mary Hogan. They're not really called Bernice Warden. They changed the characters' names, but the actress who plays basically Bernice Warden's character, she's amazing and she does a great job. She's very sympathetic. She's very you feel such incredible sympathy for her when she's killed and the the thing is they kind of change it up a little bit where the actually it's not her son, but there's a young man who helps her run the hardware store, and turns out he's like a deputy and things like that. um so they kind of changed that up a little bit. He's not really the son of that character like in real life, but yeah, they do try to pay as much attention to detail. You do see Railsback as Ed Gein. The movie doesn't get too overly graphic. I do remember, like my mother, for example, she was curious, but as a true crime fanatic, she wanted to see the movie when it first came out. She wanted to see the movie, but at the same time, she really didn't want it to be like overly graphic, get too much into the gruesome details of what Gein had done. And while it shows you some things, some of the stuff that he does, it doesn't go too overboard. So it's kind of, so it's not like the movie's unwatchable. But overall, yeah, I think it's really a good true crime film, and I would definitely say if you're a true crime fanatic, if you're into these kind of movies, and you want a movie for your true crime library, I definitely recommend getting Ed Gein. This is probably, honestly, I think this is probably about as close to a film adaptation of the true story as you're going to get, because while there are other movies about it, they take so much liberties with it and they change so much of the details of the real events in real life case and everything else. So it's like this is probably about as good as ever going to get, as far as I know. There are other movies, like I said, but they stray too far away from the facts. So this one at least really, really tries to do it as close as possible. So I give it credit for that. Like I said, though, I think the biggest thing that hurts this movie is just that, it's, you could tell it's very low budget. It really could have benefited from having a little bit more money put into it. But other than that, I would definitely say, please check it out. It's really a good movie. Steve Railsback, like I said, he's very charismatic. He's very interesting. He does great when he plays these kind of character roles. He keeps you entertained throughout the whole movie. So I would say definitely, please give it a shot. If you want a good horror movie, a good true crime movie and stuff. So yeah, Ed Gein is definitely Ed Gein from 2000. Yeah, check it out. It's a good movie. So anyway, that's going to do it. I think I've rambled on long enough. So if anybody took the time to watch this video, I thank you for doing it, and I appreciate you for doing it. I honestly hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I do weekly videos, movie reviews, all kinds of stuff. So, hopefully I'll have some good videos on my channel to keep you entertained. And Until next time, this is Cinema77, horror cult film lover, and have a good night. Take care. I'll see you later. Bye bye.